The sound of paper tearing cut through the restaurant lobby like glass shattering. A white hostess, jaw clenched and eyes narrowed, ripped the reservation slip clean in half right on the marble counter. Her voice followed, sharp and deliberate. "Oops, no table left." The words didn't just deny service. They carried judgment. A sentence passed in public. Around her, a hush spread across the polished floor. Guests waiting to be seated froze mid-conversation. A man in a navy blazer pulled out his phone. A woman in red raised hers higher. By the door, a circle of onlookers leaned closer, sensing a storm brewing inside the chandelier's golden glow. Across the counter stood a black woman, tailored navy suit, white silk blouse, simple leather watch ticking steady at her wrist. No theatrics, no panic, just stillness, the kind that fills a room without raising its voice. She didn't flinch when the reservation was torn. She didn't even blink. Her gaze held the hostess, cool and unreadable, like a lawyer weighing the value of silence. The crowd felt it too. This wasn't a woman caught off guard. This was a woman waiting. Behind her, whispers stirred. She had a reservation. I saw her name on the list. A phone camera zoomed in on the shredded paper, now dangling from the hostess's fingers like evidence at a trial. The hostess smirked, feeding on the tension. She leaned forward, her earrings catching the warm light like flashing signals of arrogance. "Try somewhere else," she added, loud enough for everyone to hear. But the black woman's voice, when it came, was calm, precise, almost surgical. "Check again." Those two words didn't rise, didn't shout, but they landed heavier than the hostess's smirk. Someone in the crowd exhaled sharply. Another lifted their phone higher. The air thickened, charged like static before a storm. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now back to her. The black woman's silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. The kind of patience that unsettles. The kind of patience that makes people whisper, "She knows something." And the hostess, mistaking quiet for surrender, rolled her shoulders back and doubled down. She shoved the crumpled halves of the reservation into a bin under the counter. "See? Nothing under your name. No reservation, no seat." Gasps scattered across the lobby like breaking waves. A man near the back muttered, "That's not policy, that's personal." Phones tilted higher. The moment was no longer private. It was evidence. Still, the black woman remained motionless, steady as stone. Her silence pressed against the noise, against the cruelty dressed as professionalism. And in that pause, in that poise, the room began to realize this was not over. 5 minutes earlier, no one in the lobby knew her name. She had walked through the revolving doors without fanfare, carrying nothing but a slim black handbag. No entourage, no assistant rushing ahead with a clipboard, no photographer trailing behind. Just her. Her suit was navy, crisp, cut to fit like it had been tailored for silence rather than spectacle. A white blouse fell clean against her frame, unadorned by logos. Even her shoes, polished leather, modest heel, were chosen not to shout but to move quietly across marble floors. That choice was deliberate, because tonight wasn't about being seen, it was about seeing. For weeks, she had heard whispers that this restaurant, hailed as one of the city's finest, was selective in ways the reservation system didn't admit. That certain guests, if they looked the part, were seated quickly, handed champagne before menus. But others, darker, plainer, less adorned, were treated as intrusions. She had been told stories, but stories weren't enough. She wanted proof. So she reserved a table for one. No corporate card, no title dropped on the phone, just her name, her real name. The hostess had written it down that morning, reluctantly perhaps, but she had written it. And that name had been printed clearly on the list that now lay in pieces on the counter. She knew what she was walking into. At 25, she had tried to celebrate her first acquisition at a trendy bistro in Chicago. She wore the same quiet navy, carried the same quiet confidence. The manager looked her up and down, then asked her to wait outside while real guests were escorted in. She remembered standing in the cold, hands in her pockets, as laughter floated out from tables she had helped finance indirectly through her first investment fund. She remembered the sting not of the wind, but of being erased. That night she promised herself, one day, no door would stay closed to her. 2 decades later, she didn't need to prove that promise to herself. She was here to see whether others would keep proving her right. And so, When the hostess tonight leaned forward, lip curled, and announced, "Oops, no table left," she didn't react, because she had seen this scene before. Different faces, different venues, same playbook. The crowd only saw a black woman in a suit being dismissed. They didn't see the billions under management. They didn't see the buildings in her portfolio, the hotels in her name, the boardrooms where her voice carried weight that shook industries. They saw simplicity. They mistook it for weakness. And that was exactly why she dressed this way. She wanted to know how this restaurant treated someone they thought powerless. She wanted the truth without filters. Now, the truth was spilling out in real time, recorded on half a dozen phones, whispered about in corners of the lobby, charged in the silence that followed her two words. Check again. This wasn't an accident. It was a test, and the staff had already failed. The silence didn't last long. From a side door near the wine cabinet, a man in a tailored gray vest strode out. He carried the kind of authority that thought it belonged to him. His shoes clicked against the floor like punctuation marks, each step louder than the last. "Is there a problem?" His voice was smooth, but underneath it sat a blade. The hostess didn't hesitate. She held up the shredded slip like evidence and announced, "She claims she had a reservation, but nothing's under her name." The manager's eyes narrowed. They scanned the black woman slowly, deliberately, starting from her shoes, pausing at her blouse, landing on her face as though weighing her worth. Then he chuckled, low, dismissive. "This isn't a diner," he said. "We don't hold tables for mistakes." The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. A man waiting nearby raised an eyebrow. Someone whispered, "Did he just say that?" Phones tilted higher. The glow of recording screens multiplied like fireflies in the dim lobby light. The CEO remained still. She didn't move a muscle. The manager leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the insult feel intimate. "If you can't afford where you're standing, there are other places better suited." He gestured vaguely toward the street, as if escorting her outside already. The hostess smirked behind him, emboldened by his presence. "She probably saw the name online and tried to copy it," she said, her tone syrupy with false concern. "It happens." The manager nodded, pleased. He tugged the reservation list from the podium, ran his finger down the names, then dragged a pen through one line with theatrical slowness. "There," he said. "Crossed out. Official. No record of you ever being here." The sound of pen scratching paper was small, but in the charged silence, it landed like a gavel. Gasps rippled through the waiting crowd. A woman near the back pressed a hand to her mouth. Another muttered, "That's not right." I saw her hand the card over. The CEO's eyes followed the movement of the pen, then lifted back to the manager. Her face remained unreadable, steady. Her voice came, measured. "You're certain?" The manager smirked. "Absolutely." He tossed the pen onto the counter like a final verdict. "Now, if you'd kindly step aside, we have real guests waiting." The words cut deeper than the hostess's smirk, deeper than the torn slip. This was no longer just policy twisted into prejudice. This was open erasure loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, and the lobby did hear. A food blogger standing in line whispered into her phone, "This is insane." She gave her name. "They just deleted it in front of us." Another guest muttered, "That's not procedure. That's personal." The room was no longer neutral. It was tense, charged, shifting. The staff didn't realize it yet, but the air had already turned against them. And still the black woman did not raise her voice. She stood as though anchored to the marble floor, her silence louder than their insults, because she knew something they didn't. The test had just moved into its next phase. The pen still rested on the counter, its ink fresh where it had slashed her name away. The hostess leaned back, satisfied. The manager crossed his arms, already scanning for the next real guests to seat. The hum of the restaurant clinking glasses, low jazz from the speakers, had grown thin under the weight of the scene. But the black woman? She didn't move. Her silence wrapped around the room like a curtain. It unsettled more than shouting ever could. Every insult they hurled slid against her composure and fell flat. She stood steady, her breathing even, her gaze locked not in anger but in patience. Patience like stone. Patience like someone who knew storms best by letting them exhaust themselves. The manager mistook it for defeat. He smirked again, leaning closer. "See? She knows she doesn't belong." But the crowd heard something else. The absence of her reaction was louder than his voice. A woman near the window whispered, "Why isn't she saying anything?" another replied. Because she doesn't need to. The hostess shifted uneasily now, sensing the tension. She crossed her arms tighter, her earlier confidence trembling at the edges. Do you understand? She said louder, her voice too sharp. There's no reservation, no seat. Leave. Still nothing. The black woman's silence was not absence. It was presence, the kind that stretched across marble floors and chandeliers, commanding without a single syllable. A memory flickered behind her calm expression. Years earlier, she'd sat in a luxury lounge waiting for service. She was ignored for 45 minutes while others were welcomed with champagne. The attendant told her, "Sorry, we must have misplaced your name." She remembered how her chest had burned then, how she had walked out without a word, vowing never to feel that small again. Tonight, she remembered that vow, and she kept it through silence. The manager tapped the counter with impatience. "I don't have all night. Step aside." She raised her eyes to him, slow, deliberate. That look calm, piercing, sent a ripple through the room. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't defiance. It was a mirror, and the crowd felt it. A young man with his phone whispered into his recording, "She's not even fighting back. She's just holding her ground." His friend replied, "That's scarier than yelling." Silence thickened. Even the jazz track seemed to fade, drowned under the collective awareness that something larger was happening. The manager tried again, his voice louder now, forced. "I said, step aside." The black woman finally spoke, but just 2 words, low and measured. "Check again." The room shifted. Those 2 words landed heavier than a shout, heavier than an argument. They carried certainty. They carried warning. The hostess froze, glancing at the manager. For the first time, doubt flickered across her face. The crowd caught it. Phones captured it. And in that fragile pause, the balance began to tilt. The silence cracked first through the soft glow of a phone screen. Near the back of the lobby, a young man in a denim jacket lifted his iPhone, thumb-pressing record. The red circle lit up like an alarm. "This is wrong," he whispered to his friend. "I'm getting this." Across the room, a woman in a burgundy dress leaned closer to her date. She had a reservation. I heard her give her name. Her date frowned but nodded, eyes darting between the counter and the cameras already raised. The staff didn't notice at first. They were too focused on their target. But the crowd, they saw everything. A blogger 20-something, blonde hair tucked under a beanie, muttered into her phone mic, "We're live outside Le Monde, downtown. They just erased a black woman's reservation. Look at this." Comments began scrolling across her live stream instantly. "No way. Name the place. Post receipts." The lobby was no longer private. It was public, everywhere at once. The hostess stiffened when she caught sight of the phones. She hissed at the manager. "They're filming," he sneered. "Let them. She'll be gone in a minute." But his confidence didn't echo in the room anymore. It rang hollow, because now a witness stepped forward. From the corner, a young waitress knew. Maybe a trainee spoke up. Her voice trembled but carried, "I saw her name this morning. Carter, reservation for 1, penthouse account." The manager's head snapped toward her. "Quiet, ho." But it was too late. The crowd had heard. Phones had captured. Another guest chimed in louder. "Yeah, she's right. I saw the list when we checked in. That name was there." The hostess flushed, her smirk faltering. "You're mistaken. People misread things." The young waitress shook her head, firmer now. "No, I remember. It was written clearly." The crowd murmured, the hum swelling like a tide. A man near the doorway muttered, "So they really did erase it." The black woman still hadn't moved. She let the voices rise around her, let the witnesses speak what she already knew. Her silence was a stage. Now the others were filling it with truth. The manager slammed his hand against the counter, trying to regain control. "Enough. This is private business." But nothing was private anymore. Not with phones raised, not with live streams ticking upward, not with strangers already taking sides. And then a phrase cut the air, spoken by an elderly woman seated near the entrance. Her voice was steady, unshaken. "That's not policy. That's prejudice." The room froze. The words landed with the weight of a verdict. The staff looked around, realizing the storm wasn't just one woman anymore. It was the whole room. And still, the black CEO said nothing. She didn't need to. The witnesses had spoken. The room had shifted, but the manager refused to see it. His jaw tightened, his voice sharpened. "Enough games," he snapped, turning back to the black woman. "You don't belong here, and I don't care who's filming." His words sliced through the lobby, louder than the music, louder than the hum of whispers. They carried the arrogance of someone who believed power came from volume. The hostess smirked again, emboldened by his anger. She crossed her arms. Maybe she thought flashing a card would fool us. Happens all the time. People try to play rich. A ripple of gasps spread across the line of waiting guests. Someone muttered, "Did she just say that out loud?" Another whispered, "Unbelievable." Phones tilted higher. From the far corner, a senior server in a black vest joined the fray. He looked the woman up and down, his lip curling. "That blouse? Those shoes? Please, real clients don't walk in here dressed like that. She's lying." Oh, the words weren't just insulting, they were surgical, dissecting her appearance piece by piece in front of strangers. The black woman remained unmoved. Her silence was a mirror, and in it, their contempt reflected back on them. But the manager doubled down, voice booming. "Security's on standby. Either she leaves now, or I'll have her removed." The crowd stirred. Murmurs swelled like a wave ready to break. A man near the door shook his head. "Removed for what? She had a reservation." The trainee waitress still hovering near the podium spoke again, louder this time. "She did. Her name was right there. I saw it." The manager whirled on her. "Say another word, and you're out of a job." But that only fueled the fire. Another guest, middle-aged with a cane, raised his voice. "Threatening your staff now? All because she asked to be seated?" The senior server rolled his eyes, dismissive. "Don't make this about race. This is about policy, and she's not following it." That single phrase, "don't make this about race," hung in the air like poison. The room erupted in low gasps, heads shaking, phones capturing every second. The black woman finally lifted her chin, eyes steady. She didn't speak, not yet, but the silence wrapped tighter, pressing against their cruelty like armor. The manager jabbed a finger toward the door. "Last chance. Walk out, or be escorted out." The crowd shifted uneasily, voices overlapping now. "This is insane." She hasn't even raised her voice. Why are they treating her like a criminal?" And through it all, the black woman stood unmoved, her stillness sharper than any protest. The staff thought they were tightening control. They didn't realize control was slipping, second by second, into the hands of witnesses, into the silence of the woman they tried to erase. The manager still had the phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying across the lobby. "Yes, send someone immediately. We have a trespasser, she's disturbing our guests." But the scene betrayed his lie. No guest looked disturbed, only disturbed by him. They weren't watching a trespasser. They were watching an injustice, and they were recording every second. The black woman finally reached into her handbag. Slowly, calmly, not rushed, not defensive, she withdrew a phone of her own, sleek, black, its screen glowing alive in her palm. With a single swipe, she opened a secure line and pressed one button. Across the city, in a high-rise office, another phone rang. A voice answered instantly, "This is Nia." The woman's reply was soft, precise, but carried enough weight to silence the crowd around her. "It's happening. Start protocol. Log every word." The air shifted. It wasn't just the tone, it was the authority. Nia didn't ask for clarification. She didn't need to. Understood. System logging now. Recording live feed from all available sources. The crowd stiffened, eyes darting. Some realized what they were hearing. This wasn't a customer calling a friend. This was something bigger, something official. The manager lowered the receiver from his ear, his smirk faltering. "What are you doing?" The black woman's gaze didn't move from him. "Documenting." Her voice was quiet, but the word landed heavy, final. On the other end, Nia's voice came again, audible enough for those close by to catch. "Incident file created. Time-stamped. Witness accounts linked." "How?" The hostess frowned, glancing nervously at the phone still aimed at her. "She's bluffing," she muttered, but her tone lacked the conviction it once carried. The senior server stepped closer, trying to regain control. "Who do you think you're calling? The cops are already on their way." The black woman's eyes cut to him, steady, piercing. "Not the cops. Mine." Murmurs rippled through the lobby. Guests exchanged glances. Someone whispered into their live stream, "She just said, not the cops." "Mine." Comments poured in. "Wait, what? Who is she?" The manager tried to sneer, but his voice cracked at the edges. "You're wasting your time. You can't intimidate us with phone calls." Nia's voice came again, crisp, professional, undeniable. "Legal department notified. Video backup synced. Do you want me to escalate access logs? The black woman answered with the calm of someone who had waited long enough. Yes, full escalation. The air thickened, charged with something new. Not just tension now, but power. Invisible, undeniable, moving like current through the room. For the first time, the staff looked unsettled. The hostess shifted her weight, arms loosening. The senior server swallowed hard. The manager's jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The crowd leaned in, sensing the balance turning. One guest whispered, "She's not bluffing." Another answered, "No, she's in control." And still, the black woman hadn't raised her voice. She didn't need to, because with one phone call, the counterattack had already begun. The lobby hung in suspended silence, broken only by the hum of phones recording and the faint hiss of jazz still playing overhead. The manager held his ground behind the podium, but his smirk had thinned into a nervous line. The hostess shifted from one heel to the other. Even the senior server's bravado seemed to wither in the weight of that calm phone call. The black woman slipped her phone back into her handbag, movements deliberate, unrushed. Then she turned, not to the staff, but to the crowd. "You've all heard enough," she said evenly. "Now hear the truth." Her voice was quiet, but it carried. Not loud, not theatrical, just controlled. And somehow, that made it louder than anything the manager had shouted all night. She stepped forward, the click of her heels echoing across marble. "You tore up a reservation," she continued, eyes sweeping the staff, "and tried to erase my name, but the name you erased was the owner of this restaurant." Gasps cracked through the crowd like thunderclaps. Phones shot higher, screens glowing brighter. Someone near the back whispered, "Did she just say owner?" Another voice answered, "She owns this place?" The manager laughed, too quickly, too forced. "Owner? Please, you expect us to believe that?" But even as he said it, his eyes darted toward the cameras, toward the guests, the witnesses, the live streams already spreading like wildfire. His words didn't carry authority anymore. They carried fear. The hostess stammered, her confidence unraveling. That's impossible. You don't look." She cut herself off, but the damage was done. Phones caught every syllable. The black woman's gaze snapped to her, cold and surgical. "Finish that sentence." End of quote. The hostess swallowed, lips trembling, unable to speak. The woman turned back to the manager. "You crossed out my name on paper. But my name isn't on paper. It's on the deed. It's in the contracts. It's on every payroll check you sign. And it cannot be erased with a pen." The crowd erupted not in chaos, but in a rising tide of murmurs, of vindication, of satisfaction. Guests who had been silent now whispered fiercely into their phones, "She owns it. She really owns it." The young waitress, who had spoken up earlier, stepped closer, her voice steady now. "I knew it. I knew your name was there, and I'm not afraid to say it again." Applause rippled, scattered at first, then growing louder, carried by the sheer force of revelation. The manager's face flushed crimson. He tried one last attempt at control, voice breaking, This is a stunt. You're lying." But the black woman had no need to argue. She reached into her handbag once more and pulled out a slim black folder. Inside, she revealed a single-sheet letterhead embossed with the restaurant's crest. She laid it flat on the counter, sliding it toward him with 2 fingers. "Articles of incorporation," she said coolly. "Check the signature at the bottom." The manager leaned forward despite himself, and there it was, her name, bold, permanent, legal, his face drained of color. The crowd gasped again, then erupted fully into cheers and clapping. Someone shouted, "Justice!" Another voice rang out, "You called the cops on your boss." The black woman looked at him one last time. Her voice was ice and fire together. "You tried to erase me, but this place exists because of me." The room roared. The staff paled. And for the first time that night, everyone saw clearly who truly held the power. The signature on the document gleamed under the chandelier light, ink pressed deep into the paper like it had been carved into stone. For a heartbeat, the entire lobby seemed frozen, caught between disbelief and revelation. Then the collapse began. The hostess, who had moments earlier torn the reservation slip with such triumph, stumbled backward. Her smirk had vanished, replaced by wide, panicked eyes. She reached for the counter as if it could steady her, but her hands shook too much to hold still. I didn't know," she stammered. "No one told me." But the crowd wasn't buying excuses. Phones recorded her every word, every twitch of guilt. The same guests who had gasped now began muttering loud enough for her to hear. You didn't need to be told. You chose to treat her that way. The senior server, who had mocked her blouse and shoes, suddenly found his vest too tight, his collar suffocating. He pulled at it, eyes darting toward the exit. This is a misunderstanding, he mumbled, but his words drowned in the noise. The manager was worse. His face had drained of color, lips pressed thin, hands trembling against the counter he had once leaned on with confidence. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. The power he had wielded like a weapon just minutes ago had evaporated, leaving him hollow, exposed, and the crowd knew it. A wave of applause broke out first from a woman in the corner, then from another guest, then from a dozen more. Phones lifted higher, recording the fall. A man near the door laughed outright. "You called the cops on your boss!" he shouted. The words rippled through the room, sparking more laughter, more clapping. The trainee waitress stepped forward, head high now, no tremor in her voice. "You humiliated her, you tried to erase her, and you were wrong." Her declaration landed like a verdict, and the crowd responded with another swell of cheers. The manager finally found his voice, but it cracked, weak and frantic. "Please, let's not blow this out of proportion." "Out of proportion?" Someone interrupted from the back. "You tore up her reservation. You lied to the police. You threatened her staff." The words cut him deeper than any shout could have. His shoulders slumped. The authority he once commanded had flipped now. Every eye in the room judged him. The hostess muttered again. "I didn't mean..." But her excuses dissolved under the rising chants. Justice. Respect. Owner. The air was no longer hostile. It was celebratory, electric, united. The guests who had once sat silently now leaned forward, smiling, clapping, lifting their phones higher to capture not humiliation but justice unfolding. The black woman hadn't moved much since revealing the truth. She didn't need to. Her calm presence filled the room, a quiet storm that had swept the staff into panic and lifted the crowd into applause. And in that moment, every bystander knew they weren't just witnessing a dinner reservation. They were witnessing a reckoning. The applause still echoed when the black woman drew her phone once more, calm, unhurried. She pressed one button, and her assistant's voice returned instantly, crisp, unwavering. "Nia, standing by." The room hushed again. The manager swallowed hard. The hostess clasped her hands together as if prayer might undo what had already been recorded. The senior server shifted on his feet, eyes flicking toward the exit like a trapped animal searching for escape. The black woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Terminate their access," she said evenly, her gaze locked on the manager. "Effective immediately." Nia's response carried through the speaker loud enough for everyone to hear. "Processing." Within seconds, the manager's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out instinctively, screen flashing red. Accesses revoked. His face drained. He tapped again, desperate, but the same message repeated. His restaurant email, his scheduling app, his staff credentials, all locked out. A chime echoed from the hostess's tablet. She looked down and gasped as her login screen vanished, replaced by a single word: terminated. The senior server's wristband, a small device used to clock in, beeped twice, then flashed red. He yanked it off as though it had burned him. The crowd erupted, phones capturing every moment. Gasps turned to cheers. Cheers turned to laughter. Guests clapped openly now, vindication swelling in the air. The black woman stepped closer to the counter, her presence commanding, her voice steady as stone. "You tore up a reservation you didn't own. You called the police on a guest who wasn't a guest. You humiliated the person who signs your paychecks. Consider this your last shift." The manager stammered, "You can't do this." But his words carried no weight. His badge had already been revoked, his access already dissolved. The system itself had answered her order before he could finish the sentence. "Yes, I can," she said simply. The hostess whispered, voice cracking, "Please, I didn't know." The woman's eyes cut toward her, sharp as glass. Ignorance isn't innocence. The line landed like a gavel. The crowd roared. Phones caught every angle, every pale face, every collapse of false authority. Someone shouted, "This is justice in real time." Another echoed, "She owns it all." The senior server dropped his vest on the counter, shoulders slumping. The manager stared at the glowing red screen in his hand as if it had betrayed him personally. The hostess covered her mouth, tears welling, but no sympathy met her, not from the crowd, not from the cameras. Because the truth was undeniable. Power had shifted. Justice had been delivered not in court, not tomorrow, but here, now, in the very lobby where they had tried to erase her. The black woman slipped her phone back into her bag, her silence speaking louder than the panic unraveling around her. And for the first time that evening, she smiled, not wide, not gloating, but the kind of smile that said, order had been restored. The chaos of collapse still lingered in the lobby. Former staff stood hollow, stripped of authority, their tools of power reduced to useless screens flashing red. Guests buzzed like a crowd after a verdict, phones held aloft, voices echoing one another. She owns it. Justice. Respect. The black woman didn't bask in it. She let the applause rise and fall on its own. Her presence remained calm, deliberate, every breath measured as though she were conducting the room without lifting a hand. She turned slowly, scanning the lobby, the chandeliers dripping with gold light, the polished marble that had just been a stage for humiliation, the guests who had shifted from silent witnesses to champions. Finally, her gaze returned to the staff huddled near the counter, pale and trembling. The manager opened his mouth, perhaps to beg, perhaps to justify, but her voice cut clean through the room before he could speak. You said there were no tables left. Funny, now there are no jobs left. The line landed like thunder. The crowd erupted cheers, laughter, applause rolling together into a wave of sound that shook the chandeliers. Phones caught every angle, captions already forming in viewers' minds. No tables left, no jobs left. The hostess covered her face with her hands. The senior server sank into a chair, defeated. The manager stared blankly at the floor, knowing his career had ended in the same room he once ruled. The black woman didn't linger. She turned away from them, toward the guests. Her steps were unhurried, her heels clicking steady against marble. Each sound was a reminder. She was the one in control, and always had been. As she reached the doorway, the trainee waitress, still wide-eyed, still standing tall, spoke softly. Thank you. The woman paused, only briefly, and gave a single nod. That was enough. The crowd parted for her as she walked out, not because she demanded it, but because respect now moved ahead of her like gravity. Phones lowered, voices hushed. In her silence, the final lesson had been delivered. Power doesn't need to shout. Dignity doesn't need permission. Justice doesn't need delay. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin. She lifted her phone once more, speaking quietly into it. Nia, close the file. Let the footage speak for itself. Understood, her assistant replied. The woman slipped the phone away, her pace unbroken as she disappeared into the city lights. Behind her, the restaurant lobby still buzzed guests retelling the moment, replaying clips, uploading videos that within hours would circle the globe. But the last words that room would remember weren't from the staff or even from the cheering crowd. They were hers. No tables left, no jobs left. A mic drop delivered not with volume, but with certainty. And certainty, she knew, was the sharpest sound of all.